Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Simply Bitcoin IRL. Today, we have a very special guest. We have William Casarin. He developed the Damus app, which is one of the most popular apps that people use to interact with nostr. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I think a lot of people don't know the face behind this amazing app that was built for nostr. So I have so many questions. You guys know me. I'm a geopolitics guy. So I have so many technical questions about nostr, what the future of social media is, what his outlook is on this. Of course, we all remember the whole thing with the App Store, how they wanted to take away the zaps and all that stuff. So I have all those questions lined up. It's going to be a great show. But before we jump into it, I want to give a very special shout out to the Bitcoin company that makes this show possible, helps us stay on the air. Swan Bitcoin, it's the best place to build your Bitcoin stack. It's being built by Bitcoiners. It's for Bitcoiners. They incentivize you to dollar cost average, and they also incentivize you to take self-custody. I highly recommend checking out swanbitcoin.com today, and you can go to swan.com/simply. If you use that referral code, you buy $100 worth of Bitcoin, they'll give you $10 worth of Bitcoin for free. So check out Swan Bitcoin today. Anyways, guys, no more delay. Let's bring up William on stage. William, how you doing, man? This usually never happens. Usually we start it late. I'm very glad that we started a little bit early. But how you doing, bro? This is crazy. So, you're relatively unknown a couple years ago, and you're just propelled into stardom because of your proof of work, man, which is awesome. That's the way that Bitcoin should be. I love the Bitcoin ecosystem for that. So before I start getting into any of the questions about nostr and Damus and all that stuff, how has that been going from 0 to 100 in a very short period of time?
Yeah, I mean, this is, not my first open source project, but it's definitely one of my first projects that kind of blew up. And this is actually it's not very common. If you're like a regular open source developer, sometimes it's hard to get people interested in your project or your library. But yeah, it seemed to struck a chord with this one. People seem to love it. Obviously, the social aspect, has driven it a lot. We've never had like a social network that we can build on our own before. We've always kind of relied on corporations and big tech for that. So now we have this protocol that we're building on, and it just feels very communal. It feels like everyone's kind of like building it together. There's a lot of passion, a lot of grassroots, a lot of Bitcoiners. So yeah, it's just tons of fun.
Yeah, and I kind of want to focus on that a little bit, right? Which is this idea that it kind of struck a chord, right? We're living in this age of censorship, man. Like and again, not to get into politics or anything, but you see it in the United States where if you have certain political beliefs or whatever, you're getting deplatformed. You're getting deplatformed on YouTube, on Twitter. Right, the Twitter files came out where the U.S. government was literally asking Twitter to censor certain people, even though that was specifically against the First Amendment. It's never been as highlighted as it is today. The importance of nostr, of also the app that you built for people to interact with it in an easier way. So, can you talk a little bit about that? What's your take on everything that's going on, all this censorship? Was it the inevitable result of centralization?
Yeah, I think it was a pretty weird situation in the early days of the internet where we had these protocols where things were mostly decentralized. We had websites, we had email. That's kind of how the internet was built. And then we got into this weird state in like 2000 to 2010 where these companies started building these monopolies on network effects, and that became very powerful because it's really hard to leave their platform once you're in it. And with that much power, they have the power to censor and control people, usually just because of advertising money, right? They just want to make the most money on advertising. So if you're saying something that the advertisers don't like or don't want to be associated with, then they have no problem like removing, because like they're just profit and they're a business. Like that's what they care about. But this just we shouldn't be building our civilization on that state of things. It's just kind of ridiculous. Like the countries, America specifically was built on very specific foundations of free speech and things like that, like you said. So when we're transitioning into the cyberspace, like we should try to retain some of those properties instead of just like building our speech on top of these corporations, which doesn't make any sense. So so I think we just got into a weird state, and now people. I think because of Bitcoin, people started to care about protocols more, and so people are more open to this idea of building on protocols. So social networking just made so much sense.
Yeah, and I love the last part that you said, which is because of Bitcoin, people started to care a little bit more. And it's interesting that you say that because it was not too long ago we had a CEO of Start9, also a good friend of mine, Matt Hill, and he was talking about it. He's like, look, like the whole thing about Start9, which love the node, personally use it myself. It's my daily driver, and it's about the idea of sovereign computing, the way that he was talking about it. And he said something very similar. He said, look, like Bitcoin, the mere fact of not having to trust someone else's copy of the blockchain, trusting your own copy of the blockchain, was kind of like the Trojan horse to get people to start thinking about sovereign computing and running their own server, so to speak, or personal server, so to speak. Before Bitcoin, that conversation would have never have taken place. So it's interesting how Bitcoin kind of started this whole movement, so to speak, sovereignty, the idea of not censorship resistance and all that stuff. So what attracted you to Nostr in the first place? Like what was it about Nostr that you wanted to work on versus working on something like Bitcoin?
Yes, I mean, I got into Bitcoin pretty early, like 2010, and I've always just found it. Bitcoin to me always represented this idea that we can actually reclaim sovereignty in cyberspace again, and it's not impossible to do. So right when Bitcoin set the standard, then it became like, well, we should be doing this in everywhere online, right? Why do we give away our data? Why do we give away, like, allow these companies to control our speech or allow us to say what we're allowed to say? So it's something that it just seemed like the natural next step after Bitcoin, in the sense that when you have free money, but what are we building our free speech online on top of? Like, what's that protocol? With money we had Bitcoin, but we didn't really have one for speech, at least online. So the first thing I looked at was Mastodon, and I was like, okay, that might work. But it turned out Mastodon and Fed and the Activity Pub was just turned out to be worse than Twitter somehow, because it ended up creating these little factions online where if you join an instance and the instance admin didn't like you, they could just ban you and you lose all your followers. So I'm like, well, that's just not going to work at scale. So and then I found this project by a Bitcoiner, Fiat Jaff, and he was working on Ellen Neural at the time. And I was working on Lightning at the time. I was working on C Lightning. And then I'm like, well, this seems kind of cool. I started playing with, built a client on a weekend, and I was using an iPhone at the time and decided to build a client, and it was the first mobile client. And then I was just amazed at how simple it was to build on this protocol, unlike most other protocols. So I was just, I got hooked right away.
So and let's talk about Nostr in itself a little bit. For anyone who's not familiar how it works, how does the centralization of it work? Like, is it very similar to Bitcoin in the sense that people are running nodes? How does that work? Like, what ensures censorship resistance and for the thing to operate the way it does?
Yeah, so like if you're this is a Bitcoin podcast, so if we're going to compare it to Bitcoin, it's quite different than from Bitcoin in the sense that with Bitcoin you have a single ledger and everyone's trying to agree on that state of the ledger, and to maintain decentralized updating of the ledger, you need this process, which is proof of work and mining. But this is a very special thing. Like, this is a very unique thing. You really only need it for money and ledger. It's actually a very inefficient system that you don't really want to build on top of. It would be really silly to have one global social network that's on a blockchain and you build blocks. So Nostr is not a blockchain. It's not like Bitcoin at all. So the way that you maintain, or the way that you build your censorship resistance is, I can give an example with, let's say if you're using Twitter or X now, if you want to send a tweet, the way that it works is that you send it to, you come up with your tweet and then you send it to a single server, and that's typically run by Twitter. And then, they have the unilateral choice to accept or reject or deplatform you. So the biggest issue there is that single server. What Nostr just provides actually a pretty simple solution, which is instead of sending it to one server controlled by one person or one entity, you actually send it to, let's say, 5 or 10 different relays, so that even if one server bans you, it doesn't matter because other people can get your messages from all those other servers. So just that simple idea, we can build on that and start building these more decentralized communication systems like social networking. But you can build more than social networking on top of this.
And what would those things be?
Yeah, so
now you have my curiosity.
yeah, so actually, nostr is always mentioned in the context of social media, and that was like a big motivating factor. But in reality, all it is it's a store and forward network for kind of like messages of any kind. So the way that this works is the typical kind for like a tweet would be kind 1, and so the kind is like a piece of data on the message, which is just a number, and you can change it to anything you want. So you could have like kind 1337, and it can represent anything. It could be like application data. It could be, some people. Anyway, we can get into examples, but one of the first things I added to the protocol, which it didn't have at the time when I joined, was like just likes. So if you wanted to like a post, there was no way to do that when I first joined. So I created a simple spec that says, okay, you can create a new note of kind 7, or I think it's 7, and then you just reference another note, and then there you go, you got a like. So this network is very extensible, and that means anyone can join and kind of extend it and extend the functionality. Another thing I added was Zaps. So Zaps is just a receipt, a lightning payment receipt. So now on nostr, on all these nostr clients, you will see a Zap button which you can click to send lightning to people, and then it's actually shown on the post that you can actually sum up these Zaps. And so it's a very flexible protocol for like decentralized notes and communication.
Yeah, and dude, interesting. So do you? And one of the things I wanted to ask you, William, is, and I think you touched upon it like in the very very beginning, with the concept of the network effect, right? And Twitter's now X, very strange, but whatever, the naming, it's very very strong, man. Like you have everyone on there. As a YouTuber, as a video content creator, right? You have something very similar with YouTube. Like, the Rumble's dope. I could upload videos there. We could live stream there, but the real numbers are going to come on YouTube, and that sucks because you're put in this predicament where it's like, the platform that has a gun to your head, metaphorically, of course, is also the platform that you're going to get the most amount of engagement and whatnot. So do you see that, like, and we all know that network effects are very, very difficult to break, right? Like, just even the mere fact of another platform catching up to YouTube. Of course, they can keep banning people and they can, they can self-destruct, so to speak. But is that something that you think about, right? How will a platform like Nostr catch up to Twitter's network effects?
Yeah, so I see, maybe there's a similar question even on the Bitcoin side of, can Bitcoin's network effects catch up with fiat money? And I think so, just because it's a better idea. And over time, more and more people adopt this better idea. And Bitcoin has a very strong, once people get it, they want to encourage other people to get it. So if you want to break existing systems, then you need those types of effects. So the way that Nostr does it is a little bit different. It's not incentivizing it via like greed or anything like that. It's actually just when you build on top of this network, you actually gain everyone else's network effect who's already built on the network. So what does that mean? So what I was talking about before, when in the activity pub case, the Mastodon case, if you were to build your following and you got banned from an instance, you lose all your followers, because the reason you lose your followers is because you don't actually control, you don't own your data in that network. So the fundamental shift in Nostr is that every piece of data you put into the network, it's owned by you in the sense that it's signed by your private key. And everyone else can validate that. There's no trust in the system, so that no relays can't send you invalid data as if your clients are verifying it. So this is actually a really important property, because that's one important property. The other important property is, once people start owning their data and start putting their data into these networks, they feel more confident about putting their social graph into this network. And then so more and more connections tend to happen on this network. And then, so let's say I'm building an application and I want to create a new chat app or a new social app. When I create an app, I get everyone, because it's like a open network and there's network effects that already exist. I can create a new viral app that kind of expands on that network effect. So it's like this viral nature. The protocol has a very viral nature to it that, which I think might start steamrolling, but we'll see. But I think that's really important, because if you don't have that, then it's not gonna work.
Yeah, I agree. Anyway, so let's talk about the app that you developed, which, by the way, I say was, and I'll get to why I say was in a second. I am a huge fan, but I was an even bigger fan when the Zaps were enabled, which I know are not your fault, but it was awesome, dude. Every single time we dropped a new Simply Bitcoin episode or Simply Bitcoin IRL, I would literally copy paste, put it in there. I get zapped like 1,000 sats. It was amazing. It was such a good feeling.
Yeah.
So, and as an Apple user, like, what the fuck, you know? And then I have another thing. Maybe this is a crazy question, but I think if Steve Jobs was alive, man, like, I don't think he would go for that, to be honest. Anyways, maybe I'm naive and crazy, but dude, I love this. It's amazing. I'm a huge fan. I personally use it. So yeah, so a lot to unpack there. Dude, what was your reaction to the Apple thing? Like, that's such bullshit, bro. Like, I was enjoying that so much, like being able to go ahead.
I actually have good news on this area in this front. So a bunch of other nostr clients are trying different things, and there's another client called Current. As of like probably a week ago, they got note zaps onto the App Store, and they did something very interesting. So they provide an option to buy a small amount of sats. It's an optional purchase, but you can buy sats within the app. And apparently this might be okay with the App Store. They didn't tell me that when I talked to them. So maybe this is like maybe a new decision within the company, or maybe they just weren't clear when they're talking to me. But if this is an option, there's potentially we can get note zaps back into Damus. But we'd have to provide a way to sell people sats probably at a horrible rate. So we're looking at that right now to get because I 100% agree. The app is just 1,000 times more special once you have those note zaps. It just feels so good when you're zapping people.
Yeah, dude, it was so nice. It was so nice because you were able to because like if you're able to like normally like what you do to monetize content is you have to go through KYC, you have to fill out a form, an approval form, whatever. Like just the mere fact of like just connecting wallet of Satoshi or whatever your wallet of choice is, and then like immediately just got like just stuff going in from, you don't know who it's from. It could be from anywhere around the world. Like it was freaking awesome. So does that concern you a lot at all that yes, like we're building open source software, we're Bitcoin super exciting, all of this stuff, but maybe not on the desktop side of things, but on the iPhone side of things specifically, since it is like kind of like a walled garden, the App Store on there. Does that worry you a little bit? Even on the Bitcoin wallet side, I actually predicted back late of last year, I said it was going to be governments. I had no idea it was going to be Apple, but I said, look, the fact that this is such like a bot, like this is such like a single point of failure is going to be used by governments. That was my prediction, like against Bitcoin wallets. Fast forward, it wasn't governments and it wasn't against a Bitcoin wallet. It was Apple themselves, and it was against the Damus app, right? So does that worry you at all?
Yeah, the issue isn't necessarily that they're doing it. The issue is that there's too many people who use Apple. Like, if we had a more diverse market of like, phones and things like that, then maybe this wouldn't be an issue. Then be like, well, then, those get out competed and people will eventually, choose the non-Apple option. But their hardware is just too damn good and there's too many damn people who use it. So yeah, it's definitely tricky because they have a lot of power. When you said like, oh, I'd be worried about the governments or Apple, at this point I was like, who's the biggest, the more scary entity, and at least in digital life is probably not the government, but probably Apple, because they're, imagine if the government says, okay, we're going to take 30% tax on all your transactions, like every digital transaction you make. I mean, they basically do that anyway, but these days with the inflation tax and stuff. But yeah, it's kind of, I mean, centralized entities of any kind, they are risk, but this is why we build it on a protocol and not a specific platform. That's why we, Damus isn't just, a centralized server that Apple can say what to do. It's like, on Damus, users can still receive zaps from Android users and desktop users. So yeah, so, I mean, it's going to be really hard for them to stop what's coming and what's happening.
Yeah, and what do you mean it's going to be very difficult for them to stop if they have this monopoly, so to speak? What do you mean by that?
They can't stop zaps. Zaps are just information, right? Zaps are just, anyone can send you a zap. Even if Apple says Damus people can't zap other people, well, they can't stop other people from zapping you on Damus, right? So that's still allowed. Like if there actually is the zap button still on all the note or on all the posts in Damus, but you just can't click it. Damus users can't send zaps, but you can still receive zaps just fine.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, all right, so I think you told me in the beginning that you're a fan of Apple products. Has this made you an Android maxi?
No, because I just don't like Android. I just think they're clunky. I'm a Linux maxi. I love my Linux box. I love Mac hardware. I love my AirPods. I love how everything works together so nicely. They just have really good products. So I just wish they would stick to building hardware and stop, thinking they deserve 30% off every digital transaction peer to peer between individuals. It's like, it doesn't make any sense to me, but.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm a huge Apple fan as well, and it is what it is, and it kind of sucks. And I'm sticking to what I said about Steve Jobs. I think if Steve Jobs was still alive, I don't think they would do this. I really don't think so. Anyways,
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Go ahead.
If some magical company comes along and makes hardware as good as Apple, and it's like more freedom and like open source and open hardware, maybe modular hardware, like I would obviously switch, but like to imagine a world where that is going to happen anytime soon, it's really hard, right? So
yeah,
it's expensive to make phones. Like there's a reason everything costs so much. It's like a huge investment to get that to that level of quality and to that level of like, the things that are required to make a phone are just insane of that quality, at least.
Of course. And then also they have the market for it, right? Which like kind of justifies the R&D and just it's better. Like at this point, I would say like phones are better than laptops in a way, because you could tell that they've invested so much more money into, making this thing just so convenient in your hand. But yeah, I completely agree. And yeah, I don't see a world where, how old is Apple? It's like 40 years old. Like Microsoft just shit the bed completely. So it's just basically Google versus Apple at this point. Anyways, all right. So, we have Elon that launched, that has his hopes and dreams at making Twitter, that is now X.com, into the everything app, so to speak. I think that is a horrific idea, just because of, the censorship concerns. I'm getting like little flashbacks of those videos in China of the people like scanning their eyeballs to like get on train. Like everything's apparently through WeChat over there. So what's your take on that?
It's just like, it's like combining all the worst ideas from like just look at what happened to PayPal. It's basically a company from Elon, and it's just a complete nightmare mode. If you want to see what like CBDC future would be like, just own a PayPal account, and if you say the wrong thing, they'll just literally close it and steal all your money. So it seems like that's just gonna be more of that, plus complete KYC identity verification. It's just like what is he doing? It doesn't make any like it does make zero sense, or maybe some people would want to sign up for that, but I don't know. It just seems insane to me. But I really think Nostr really front run the whole everything app idea, because you can only really build that on an open protocol that is very interoperable. So I feel like Nostr is the stuff that people are building on Nostr are going to become the everything app.
Interesting. Okay, that's a bold statement. The people that are building on Nostr are gonna become are gonna be the everything app. Do you think we'll ever get to a point where the Damus application is going to be as seamless as the Twitter application is today?
There's no reason why it can't be. It's really just developer resources. It's mostly just me working on it, and I feel like I got pretty close. It's not as fast, but like that's just a matter of like hammering away and making it faster. But yeah, I'm working on new technology right now that's going to improve like syncing between phones, and even potentially making phones into relays themselves, so that it's be more peer-to-peer. So there's a lot of technologies that are yet to be built out. But yeah, I do truly believe that Nostr has the best shot at being the everything app, because look at what happened like with the web once we had a way to have these protocols that we can build on, and everyone was building different applications, and in some sense I see HTTP as like the everything app for applications, at least on the web. It's a way of connecting all these different things. So Nostr is just a more powerful way of doing the web. it's kind of like a new form of web, which is instead of documents, instead of web pages, you have these applications that we're building on top of, and then the data within the applications are all shared. So it's like a pretty profound technology that will lead to a lot of interesting use cases like that, like the Everything app.
Yeah. Interesting. So do you, it sounds like you need help. Do you need help on Nostr? If any open source developers out there, is that something that you are interested in and you're looking for?
Yes. So go to damus.io/code, and we have like 600 issues open. If you want to start hacking on Damus, it's completely GPL, open source, free software. And I feel like that's kind of been my goal in the past like 2 or 3 months, is just kind of build an open source, like I want to be like the Linux of like Nostr, in the sense, just like look at how many people contribute to Linux. There's like thousands of developers. It's an insane project. We need that scale if we're going to beat these corporations. We need a lot of people working on it. So yeah, I've been specifically trying to set up Damus to make it easier for contributors to contribute. But yeah, there's a lot of other open source projects where you can kind of jump in, or even just build your own project. It's a huge dev community. So we welcome you.
I have a question for you. So Twitter is obviously a business. It relies on sponsors, and now it's direct subscription model, and any type of way that Elon's going to try to figure out how to monetize this thing. What is the business model for Nostr? Like how do you make money from Damus? Is that completely is that just completely contributor based, like people supporting you? What's the monetization aspect of it, or is there none?
So actually, almost like the very first month when I launched Zaps, I was probably making $5,000 to $10,000 a month on Zaps, and that's just like I don't have that many. I maybe have like 100,000 followers, but in terms of like influencer people, I'm not like that big. So I was just picturing a world where people are actually more and more people on this. Like more and more people are joining the network, and this network effect gets bigger and bigger, and lots more people are on Lightning and maybe buying sats through the app and just like zapping people who are who they like. I just think the value for value is such a powerful model in this system. We just have to hit a certain scale for it to like be like in nuts amounts of money. Like the amount of money people are making on the Twitter side is pretty high right now, just because there's so much advertising money. But I feel like if we had a couple 100 million people on Nostr, or even just like 10 million people or something, everyone's zapping, like I think it could get pretty crazy.
How's the growth, by the way?
It's hard. Sometimes it's hard to track that. Like one example of this is basically a large part of Japan. There's like a Japanese subculture of like Nostr users now, and we actually have a conference in Japan on November 1st, and you can sign up on nostr.world. It's called Nostrasia. But the reason why it's kind of hard to measure is because they actually have their own relays, and we don't actually see a lot of their activity on the main relay, on like the North American relays, because there's activity going on in the country and we don't even see it. And that's kind of the cool thing about this protocol, is that you can have these pockets of like geo pockets that have their own relays, and you might not even. So there could be n number of users, and we have no idea how many people are using it. But in terms of like all the pub keys we've seen on the network, I think it's around a million people. And the growth of that it's slow and steady. It's not like anything crazy, but it's definitely impressive so far.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you before we kind of change topics a little bit was the follower count, right? So it's interesting because every time I like press the load button, it like changes. So like I sometimes I have more, sometimes I have less. Like does that have to do with the relays? Like what like how does that work?
Any app that has a follower account is a centralized app, because that means there's a central source of truth for how many people follow you. The best you can do is like this relay that I'm talking to, like give me all the contact lists on that relay. So contact list is just another note, is kind 3, and it basically just has all the pub keys that you follow. So if you want to get everyone who follows you, you actually have to pull down everyone's contact list to see if you're on the list, which is actually really slow. That's why like it doesn't automatically do it in Damus. And of course that will change, because depending on which relay you connect to, they're going to have different sets of contact lists of different people. Imagine if I connected to the Japanese relays and pull down, I can actually see everyone in Japan who's following me, right? if they even publicize it. Like sometimes there's private lists that you can't even see who's following you. So this idea of like a follower count doesn't actually make any sense when you think about it in a decentralized system. Anyway, that's been my excuse as to why it's not good in Damus yet. But I have some things that I'm working on that'll improve it, at least from your local view. So we're actually building a database into Damus so that it'll start collecting these lists over time.
But wait, isn't that centralization?
No, if you're just a node who's like pulling down stuff from the network, and each node will have a different view of the network, right? So like they might be connected to different relays, and they'll have a different follower count for you. So individually you'll all have different counts, and then eventually the idea is that they'll be eventually consistent. If you see a wider and wider view of the network, then you'll have a more and more accurate follower count, and that's kind of where Damus is going. Is that it won't maybe not be accurate at the start, but that over time the count will get more and more accurate.
Gotcha. Interesting. I always wondered that because I was like, hey, today I have less, today I have more. And I was like, okay, maybe it's some technical thing that I don't understand. Yeah. It's an interesting way. I love the way that you described it. Anyways, so another question. So do you, I've heard this theory 1,000 times, which is this idea that a lot of the clown world that we're all experiencing right now is so-called peak centralization. Do you buy into that theory that we're in peak centralization society, and now we are, whether you believe in the theory from the sovereign individual, right, which is, the information technologies is really going to change the relationship between the state and the individual, the individual and these powerful institutions. So do you believe in that theory that we're living through the last days of peak centralization and we're going to decentralize as a society?
I mean, I could totally see it going the other way as well. Like, imagine if it just gets much, much worse and becomes much more dystopian. I don't see why. I think Bitcoin was like the first, light in the darkness that I would hope people would care about and move toward. But there's no guarantee, right? If people don't care about decentralization, then, and people just enjoy being sheep and being sold as data to these companies. Actually, the majority of people are fine with that. If you think about it, most people are just too busy trying to pay their bills to care about decentralization or why it might be important. So yeah, I could see it going either way.
Interesting. I mean, and by the way, I do agree with you. I think I say this all the time is the bread and people are so distracted with the bread and circuses. Like they just, I think it was on it was on a Natalie Burnell podcast. And she asked Saylor, what keeps you up at night? And then his response was, people just don't care about sound money. And, and I kind of, and I know this is kind of Bitcoin related, but it kind of applies to this. I think people love convenience. I think they just love convenience. And, I think Bitcoiners is like, no, I would rather run my own node. I'd rather do my own thing, have my own information. Fuck that. Hold my own private keys. But the vast majority of people, especially in the developed world, they're like, what? There's that famous meme of like, of the guy like cooking on the barbecue. And then they're like, they tell him like, look, the money's broken. And the guy like looks and he's like, that's interesting. Did you see the game on Sunday? And that just kind of like it just kind of gives me, it perfectly represents what I feel like is happening in the developed world, where convenience is king. People are so comfortable. There's a lot of wealth. Obviously in the developing world, you pitch someone on Bitcoin or you pitch someone,
they get it instantly.
Yeah, it's instantaneous. They're like, yeah, where do I sign up? This is a phenomenal idea. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are happy with convenience up into a certain point, and that certain point is like when they can no longer afford like groceries, and then they're like, what is going on? Like, why is everything so broken? So I think inflation is like this thing that I think is pushing people to start thinking about like, why is this happening? And they start going down that hole, like, what is money, and why is money getting devalued? And then they realize it's like, oh, it's the centralized entity, aka the government, which is like actually printing more money and literally out of greed and like just to line their pockets and to line their buddy to like help out their buddies. And then they're like, and then they'll start to be like, well, this is not cool. This isn't fair. And that's where things start to get really scary, because yeah, people get really angry, and so this is the thing that I'm obviously concerned about. That is like the breakdown of civilization when this happens. So it might get really ugly, and maybe like this discussion of decentralized protocols, it probably won't be even that important because everyone will be like killing each other. So I don't know.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's interesting to say the least. So, I kind of want to go back to the aspect of I was saying, look, like we're reaching peak centralization, yeah, where the world's decentralizing. You're like, no, Nico, it could definitely get even worse. So I kind of want, because I haven't really heard that often, heard that argument often. Maybe people have a more optimistic perspective because of Bitcoin. So, just like, why do you say that? Like, why do you think things can get worse?
I just think like it's really. I mean, I'm an optimist. Like I kind of I would like to see that route. Like Bitcoin is this bulwark of freedom and free money that could sway the tide, and I totally think that could happen. It's just I can't say for sure. Who knows, right? Because the world is very complex, and there could be these black swan events where it just pushes us into a darker area. So I think anything can go. I think the world's too complex to say like for sure that Bitcoin will save us.
Interesting. Okay. All right. I like that. I like that. And that also like kind of puts like a fire up everyone's ass, right? Because they take it a lot more seriously, so to speak, because
just don't take it for granted. Like obviously this is a fight. Like we got to keep fighting and we got to keep pushing. And I don't believe that it's going to be as simple as just, oh well, we have it now and then we're just going to like stroll down into a happy future. No, I think it's going to be a continuous fight that we got to fight for.
100%. I completely agree. I just don't think they're just going to go gently into that good night and say, hey guys, you found sound money. You found, decentralized social media that we can't censor and control the narratives on. We're just gonna go gently into that. Good night, you guys won. Here are the keys. I completely agree.
Yeah, maybe because I'm bitter lately because of Apple, and I just realized like, oh, this is me coming up against the existing power structures, and I struck a nerve, and I'm like, okay, we have Zaps, we have the Zaps protocol. Obviously, like you can't stop it, so Apple's just gonna accept it. It's like, nope. I'm like, okay, so I guess we got to keep fighting for this if we want sovereign individuals to send Lightning and Bitcoin to each other on Apple devices. Like it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a fight. So
yeah. So you were saying this earlier and got me like very excited because so obviously we make content. We love value for value. Shout out to the guys at Fountain. We're going to be on Geyser very, very quickly. On Damus, it was amazing.
Geyser's awesome, and they have good nostr integration now, which is awesome.
Yeah, dude, so many people are huge fans. I know Start9 has like an app for nostr as well. But yeah, so this idea of the value for value thing, right? Dude, you're making 5 to 10 G's a month.
I was until they axed the nodes.
Yeah, but obviously, dude, you created the app. So like, like that makes perfect sense. Like, people want to support you, want to support your proof of work. But, as a content creator and simply is like not to toot our own horn or anything, but in terms of Bitcoin channels, like we're pretty decent size for Bitcoin only content channel. And the value for value doesn't come close to the sponsorship model. Like currently the sponsorship model is what pays the bills. So in an ideal world, it'd be fucking amazing value for value, because then it's just awesome, because you're just being supported by your viewers, and that'd be incredible.
So here's my theory. Like I think the reason why value for value isn't working is because it's not designed right. It's not designed correctly. So for the reason what do I mean by this? So in the early days of Damus, we only had the Zap button on the profile, and to like get to it, you had to go to your profile and click it, and no one would ever do that, right? The minute we added the Zap button to the post, basically the value for value revenue went through the roof. And I'm like, this was just one small design decision that completely changed the way that people use the app. So I think that, if we just slightly tweak, make it easier for people to Zap, make it easier for people to actually do it. A good example of this is like, there's a website called like Zap Stream, and you can actually, do zaps in a live stream situation. So that's just another example of like, just make it easier for people to support people and make it fun. Because if it's not fun or easy, then they're not going to zap you. So anyway, so I think we're still early. I think the reason we're seeing the low zap revenue is just because it's not designed well yet.
Interesting. Wait, whoa, okay. So it was a simple UI issue, right?
Yeah.
That
which 100x the amount that people were zapping.
Dude, that is freaking fascinating. Okay,
it was mind blowing for me when I'm like, and that's when I knew when they told me that they're gonna have to remove no zaps. I'm like, this is gonna kill zap revenue because it's just people love how easy it is. If you just make it easy, people do it. Yeah,
that's the whole point. Like, and it's so like, I remember like it was such a good feeling, bro. It was such a good feeling. You like you link your content. You whatever, and it's just like 1,000 zaps here and there, and you
got that little the haptic feedback. It feels good. It's like
fucking feedback.
It's like it's actually not about it actually feels good for the person who is zapping. I think there's a psychological aspect of having like haptic feedback on a zap button. It actually just feels good. I don't like even if it's just crazy. There's something that I discovered when I removed the zap button. So we have this feature in Damus where if a user turned on the only zaps mode in Damus, it would actually remove your like button for other people. And people got so angry when individuals if you were an individual and you chose that you don't want to be liked, because you actually won't even see likes on your post if you turn on only zaps mode. But the thing is, this angered people who wanted to like their post, even if they would never see the like. They're like, I still want to zap it, or I still want to like it. It's for me. I don't care if the other person doesn't see it. I'm like, I discovered something really deep about psychology that day. It's like, it's not for you. It's actually for them. They want to feel good about zapping. They want to feel good about liking. Just make it feel good for them and make it easy, and then people will do it.
Dude, that is so freaking fascinating. And that makes me 100 times more optimistic. So it was a UI problem. It was literally a UI problem. And it's so I guess you could say that psychologically we haven't cracked the nut yet.
Here's another thing we can do. Like, I haven't even done this yet, but people have been asking for this. Sometimes people forget and not think about zapping your post. Maybe they want to support you, but maybe they're busy and they didn't get it. They didn't see the post, or they didn't have time to zap it. Imagine if in Damus you could set up, and you can actually already do this in some nostr clients. I think Snort Social does this. Imagine if you set up, okay, every time I zap, anytime I zap anyone, I want to actually send a proportion of those zaps to these people that I want to support. So just make it automatic, make it easy, and then you'll just start getting a passive income stream just from people zapping and using the app regularly. So there's just stuff like that. It's a design decision, and we can do it, and it could just really drastically improve supporting people. Okay,
so wow, this is fascinating. Okay, so do you think we'll ever get to a world where, so I know that you guys have the image hosting natively through the app. Do you think we'll ever get to a world where we have video natively supported on the app as well?
I think anytime you have like high bandwidth operations like video or audio, and you want it to work well, you basically are forced to rely on centralized solutions. But it doesn't mean you can't have decentralized centralized solutions, in the sense that you could run your own CDN or your own video stream service. But it's a little bit harder to do peer-to-peer. Those are typically peer-to-peer technologies, which nostr isn't really peer-to-peer. So
gotcha. So do you see a, because that's the vision. After speaking with Matt from Start9 and whatever, do you see this more decentralized world where people are, for example, like from my Start9, I'm running a nostr relay, right? Like I'm doing that myself, right? So do you see this world of more and more individuals kind of running their own sovereign server? And you can get kind of tricky with it, because you can build that into a router, and a router is basically already like a dedicated computer just plugged into your Ethernet port. You could definitely put like a little a low end server already there that's also a Bitcoin node. I guess you know where I'm going with this, right? Do you see that world kind of developing, or is that just a pipe dream for us crazy Bitcoiners? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those people. I run a node, I run a Lightning node, I run a Bitcoin full node, and I have it on the internet. But it's not easy. It's not easy to set that up. Um, so I think most people are not going to do that. It's actually kind of hard to run network services on your home network. There's ISPs really block a lot of ports and make it difficult. Sometimes they have dynamic ports, and so I think it's actually a pretty difficult prospect for most people. But this is where nostr actually works really well for a lot of people because you don't have to run anything. You just connect to a bunch of relays, and if those relays go down, it's fine because you're connected to more than one. So that model just happens to be really easy for people, and I think that easiness is partially why. I mean, a big part of why Damus and nostr are successful, are becoming more and more popular because you don't have to run a node. I think Bitcoiners because in Bitcoin you have a specific reason to run a node. You get to privately view your balances and your transactions without relying on a third party, and there's actually good reasons for that. But in nostr, it's like, well, all the conversations are mostly public, and so there's not too much incentive to run your own, unless you're just like backing up your stuff, which is actually really useful. I mean, I run a local backup as well. So yeah, I know there's different reasons to run it. I don't know if there's a very strong reason to run a nostr relay except for backups, but yeah, I mean, maybe one day just Damus just makes it easy to run. Maybe your phone becomes your node, right? I feel like on nostr we're more likely to be able to do that versus like running a Lightning or Bitcoin node, which is much harder.
How much data is stored on a nostr relay?
Well, nostr relays are just text, right? They're just JSON blobs, which can be stored very efficiently. So I probably run one of the biggest nostr relays, and I think it's up to like 300 to 400 gigabytes, only because like within the first couple months I didn't have spam protection on, so like half of that's just spam. Now it has rate limiting and stuff, but it's very, very efficient with storage, and you can put a lot of stuff in it.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's not like Bitcoin at all, just because it's text.
Yeah, and Bitcoin, they're storing the world's transactions, and in your case, you could actually just run your own kind of private community, and that would get low traffic and not need to not have huge storage requirements. It's not like you, and then and there's another thing we can do on nostr, which is you can actually just like prune everything and not worry about maintaining states or anything. So yeah, you have much more flexible options for reducing the size of your data.
So you're talking about spam. Like, what do you mean spam? Like, what is that? What does that mean? What does that entail?
Yeah, so if you're running a public relay, which means that, hey, it's kind of like we're doing this for fun and anyone can post messages. When you do that, like, you don't need to do that. You can have paid relays, and people actually do have paid relays where you pay like 10,000 sats to send a message. But if you want to make it easy for new people to get on, it's really helpful to have a public relay. So for instance, whenever you join Damus, you can actually just create an account and start posting. You don't have to there's no sign up process, there's no email, there's no data collection. So all you have to do is generate a private key, but that has a downside, which means that anyone can generate infinite number of private keys and spam your node and put advertising on it and stuff like that. So yeah, that's, if you don't have rate limiting on your relay, then people can just spam it like at full speed, which is not good.
Gotcha. Interesting. So in your eyes, William, we have these two futures in front of us, right? We always say it on the Simply channel. It's either Bitcoin or slavery. I definitely put nostr and Damus on the side of Bitcoin. Definitely put CBDCs and X.com, Twitter, all those centralized social media platforms definitely on the side of slavery. What is the future of social media in your eyes? If you were master of the worlds, how would you envision that world?
Yeah, I think we're moving to, especially now that we have nostr, we're moving to a world where social media is less about corporate, money making schemes and advertisement. It's much more human. It's much more. It feels better. I feel like people on nostr tend to be happier because they're freer. Like you actually feel free. You know that no one can censor you. You know that no one can deplatform you. And actually that makes you feel really good. And because I think what happens a lot on social media is that people self-censor themselves because they're worried about being themselves, because if they post the wrong photo or if they say the wrong thing, then and if it's not corporate ad friendly, then you'll be removed. Or if someone else reports you, then you'll be removed. So there's so much self-censoring happening on these networks, and it's actually a very unnatural state. It feels very wrong. It feels very corrupted, and it feels very unhuman because people are just, we want to just speak freely with each other, and we don't feel like I don't know. So I feel like we're leading to a world where social media is much more human, much more much more local, much more community based, much more less algorithms, less like mind control from like algorithms and advertising. So I don't know. I think we're moving in a good future.
I love that. And by the way, I've felt that 100%. I think like the first nostr things that I said were just like things that I knew that there was no possible way I was going to be able to say that on Twitter. And to my surprise, then I figured out that you can't delete stuff. So I was like, wait a second. Oops. So yeah, I mean, that was interesting, but yes, I do 100% agree. You definitely feel a lot more free. Definitely feel a lot more free. Do you think that there's, because I'm going to play the devil's advocate for a little bit. Cause of course, as a Bitcoiner, of someone who makes content, I think censorship is like literally a crime, but the other side would say, one of their main talking points is hate speech, right? Like hate speech, this, hate speech, that, terrorists, drugs, non KYC, bad people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What would be your response to that?
I mean, I always say like information wants to be free, in the sense like why we don't apply the same standards to like, let's say websites, for instance. Anyone can start a website and put their hate stuff on there, like, or I guess Alex Jones was censored off but he has his own website, Infowars, and you can go there and so even if you don't like his speech, there's a place on the internet where you can be free. So why do we have different standards when it comes to social networking versus the internet? Like, on the internet, information wants to be free, and if you want to control or censor that, then it's just not the place for it. So that's how I view nostr. Is that it's just a different world, and it's a different reality that people need to accept. Because it's not a centralized solution. There's not a single place where you can go. There's not a trust and safety team that you can go to and say you need to remove this content. So it's just a new reality, and I think people just need to live with it.
And what are the consequences of that new reality? I have my own, like, I think it's a forcing function, just like the self censorship, just so that you don't want to be deplatformed is a forcing function. I think the mere fact of not being able to deplatform certain speech, in my opinion, it's a forcing function in the sense that it will actually force people to tell the truth in the long run, because they can't just take away anything that they, that makes them look bad, talking about politicians, right? So I think in the long run, it kind of forces people to, tell the truth and have integrity and be honest about things, It
completely gets rid of the people who rely on censorship to win arguments. So it kind of elevates the argument. So now you have to use ideas to fight an argument, and the best ideas have to win, because you no longer have this like slimy trick where you can just deplatform someone to win an argument. So I think it's going to improve discourse. It's going to make people be more honest, and especially with that feature, like you said, you can't delete stuff. Well, you can technically delete stuff, but it's not guaranteed, right? So it basically you can't delete stuff. So it actually increases the amount of integrity on the network, in the sense that that you can't just be slimy and say something rude and then be able to delete it. It's like you actually have to stand for your speech, and it makes people think twice when they're sending a message into cyberspace, because like they'll know it'll be there and it's out there, right? It's information.
Yeah. So let's talk about something else that also I've had a little bit of experience making content, which is copyright. Obviously you're saying that most of stuff, not all of the stuff is text based, but you could still say that some text is copyrighted. And I like the whole copyright thing on the internet is such a giant clusterfuck, to be perfectly frank. They've built in systems where, it's automatic, and they'll just generally just scan everything. They'll see if it has a copyright, but it sounds like, because of these decentralized social media platforms, a copyright's going to be very, very difficult to enforce, if not impossible to enforce. So I think that's one of the unintended consequences of this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that nostr is a text-based protocol, because the fight of copyright in terms of like media and like movies and images and things like that. I think that's a much bigger fight, and obviously there's protocols that are better at getting around that, such as BitTorrent and things like that. So yeah, so I'm happy that I don't have to fight those battles, because there are people who, because imagine if nostr stored images and people start uploading illegal images like child porn, things like that, and that would just instantly kill relays, right? So it's actually really important that that's not in Nostr's fight, because I think the more important fight is free speech, and we need to focus on that. But the copyright issue is like not something that's typically dealt with, because it's because of the text, right? So.
Gotcha. Okay, interesting. So what you're saying is that it doesn't really apply to the nostr, or the Damus or the nostr protocol. So
yeah, I mean, people could start publishing like ebooks or something. That would be interesting. But then it's like, yeah, then you'd have to start. But typically the note sizes are so like they're restricted, so you can't put too many things into a single note. I think the max size on a lot of relays is like 100 kilobytes. So it'd be very inefficient and kind of dumb to do that.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I want to use the last couple minutes or so to talk about any hidden features or any future things that you have on the Damus roadmap that that you can reveal to the audience today listening.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to bring notes apps back with if this actually works. If this thing that Current is doing, with having an in-app purchase that purchases sats. I need to figure out how I'm going to do that. Maybe I'll just have my node like send sats to people through Apple Pay somehow. But I think notes apps coming back is going to be a thing in the future. I've been working hard on the nostr DB, which is this new engine, which is going to be much more efficient at syncing and potentially even make Damus more of a peer-to-peer nostr app, which would be really cool. Because imagine if you can just sync notes between your phones. There's so much stuff. Like and I've been a big fan of like stories on Instagram. Like I don't want to use Instagram anymore. The only reason I use Instagram is stories. So I want to add stories, maybe like a profile grid of images. Yeah, it's like limitless the things we can add, and we just make it better and better. And so expect all those things in the near future. So.
Man, that's really exciting, and I really think that this will shine the more they censor. And in countries where the powers that be are not a fan of free speech, I think apps like these are just like, or protocols better said, like they're essential for human communication, freedom of speech. Anyways, William, it's been quite an honor and a privilege to have you on the show today. Huge fan of what you've created. Obviously the community is as well. It's been extremely well received, and thank you so much for coming on Simply Bitcoin today.
This was an awesome chat. Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Appreciate it, man. So why don't you tell everybody on the interwebs listening where they could find you specifically, and where they could find more info about Damus and stuff?
Yeah, I'm actually mostly only posting on Nostr these days. So if you go into a Nostr client and type in jb55 at jb55.com, that's my Nostr address. So you can find me there. And I have a website, jb55.com, I guess. But yeah, that's where you'll find me.
Awesome, dude. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to put you backstage for a sec. Guys, thank you so much for listening to another episode of Simply Bitcoin IRL. If you enjoyed the show, you know what to do. Smash that like button. Consider subscribing if you feel like we provided you value. And we'll see you tomorrow for a brand new episode of Simply Bitcoin Live at 12:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Peace out, y'all.